Hey guys, it is Nick here with our next topics Marvel What If topic video for today. And today, we got kind of a long one on us for this topic today. Now, I could have split this into two parts, but like I said with the Marvel Universe, I try to cover that in one video because just the material of it is easy enough to just cover in one video. Now, we all know about Tom Holland being in the MCU as Spider-Man, and I did a video of Tobey Maguire being in the MCU instead of Spider-Man recently. And I even said to you guys in that video that I was going to cover the last Spider-Man who could possibly be in the MCU. What if Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was in the MCU instead of Tom Holland or Tobey Maguire? Now, whereas Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man character pretty much played his part and the role went to Miles Morales for some of the movies, Andrew Garfield's character and person in general is older than Tobey Maguire. So him being older, that changes more than Tobey Maguire's story. That means not all of his characters have been played out, not all the villains in his storyline have been played out, and there's more to be explored. Also, it's just an interesting idea to see the oldest Spider-Man here, because that means that he'll get recruited to the Avengers faster. But before we jump into that part, let's set the scene. So the Amazing Spider-Man movie happens. It takes place right after the Avengers New York City battle. We see a post-credits scene of Tony Stark meeting Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield, for the very first time. And it's a lot different than the other two Spider-Mans, obviously, and he ultimately joins the Avengers. So, with him joining the Avengers, that means by the time Iron Man 3 comes out, might actually see a little bit of Spider-Man play a part here. So, let's get into that particular movie. So the movie begins, Peter meets Tony along with Maya, although already knowing Tony, and whenever Tony goes missing, Peter is instantly on the rush to go ahead and find him. Now, the movie goes pretty much the same up until Spider-Man finds Tony, Iron Man, whatever you want to call him, and they find their way back to Tony's home together, and they go and fight the Mandarin, ultimately winning in the end. And this bond between them earlier on, that would be like super changing in the MCU. Now, then we move on to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie, and this is where things deviate, because after Andrew loses Gwen, his MJ, this is where the story would end. There would be no Rhino, but there would be plans of the Sinister Six. Also, forgot to mention, there are going to be some comic and other MCU unrelated things involved here, because I think that's what would happen. Anyway, the Sinister Six plans are made as Harry will stay in prison. Now, we move on to Avengers Age of Ultron, and Spider-Man would actually play a decent role here, or at least Andrew Garfield's portrayal. He would help the Avengers retrieve the scepter and go through the Hydra bases together, and also help Tony and Bruce in the creation of Ultron. Whereas Tobey Maguire's character, a lot more was going on with him. As I said, his character arc was basically completed. But here's where things take a turn for the worse for him. Remember the Scarlet Witch and how she hallucinated with Thor and everything else? This would play a down factor for Spider-Man. I can guarantee that if Spider-Man was there, she would be able to use her magic to make him hallucinate someone like Gwen, because that would really, really get to him. He ultimately would fall down for the moment, but after Tony would reconsole him, he would be back in the fray and help the Avengers in the final battle against Ultron, ultimately meaning a much bigger much better fight for them and saving a lot more people. And here's another big thing. I think this is where, since is the oldest Spider-Man, I think that he would get the iron suit much earlier than both the other Spider-Mans. Because at this point, they've known each other for so long, Tony would feel like he deserves something like this, to commend him for being, like, a very good team player. And after this, even after the whole hallucinating Gwen thing, Peter knows that New York City still needs him, and Webb swings down to protect the populace, still remaining a hero. Now, we move on to Civil War, which still happens. And he would be on Tony's side, rather Tobey Maguire. He was on Cap's side because he just wanted to give up being Spider-Man, but this play a bit differently. He's actually on Tony's side. Fight goes normal, and this time when Iron Man realizes the truth about his parents, he goes in straight for the kill to kill Bucky. But I forgot to mention, Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man, actually goes with him. So right whenever Iron Man's about to go for the kill, Spider-Man stops him and reminds Tony about his losses. This wouldn't sway Tony at first, but understanding what Peter's gone through and everything, and just still viewing Cap as still a friend, even though he kept the whole killing parents thing from him, he does spare both their lives, but does take Captain America's shield like the original. Well, I mean, in the original, granted, Cap just threw down the shield. But anyway, he takes the shield, and after that, Spider-Man would say he has to go back to New York City because Spider Senses feels that something is wrong. And this is where we'd actually see some more context with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man character in the events of The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Don't mind the pictures. These are just pictures off the internet that were made. It's not, like, actually, like... If this is actually what it's going to be, then okay, but I'm going off speculation. Anyway, the plans of the Sinister Six in this movie would be playing out, with Harry being one of them, Rhino actually making his first appearance rather than not in Amazing Spider-Man 2. We would see Vulture for the first time, with the help of Gustav Fires, or however you want to say it. Like I said, these are mainly comics and just unrelated characters to that, but I'm just going off speculation. Bear with me. We would also see Dr. Octopus, or Dr. Octavius, for the first time in the Amazing Spider-Man films, as one of them, being one of the scientists that survived. Harry would recruit Felicia as the Black Cat, and Mysterio. So there we have the Sinister Six for the Amazing Spider-Man 3 movie. And this is where I think that Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, would actually find another girl around this time in the name of Betty. If you don't know her from the Tobey Maguire films, I forgot her last name, but this is just a picture of, just visualize what she'd look like in the Amazing Spider-Man 3. I'm only going off of the more movies because I just feel like something like this would happen. I do my research, okay? But ultimately, he doesn't really stay with her because of Gwen. He hallucinates her. Anyway, the fight with the Sinister Six goes down, with Betty eventually getting kidnapped, and in a post-credit scene, we get Dr. Connors, the Lizard, if you don't know him from the other Amazing Spider-Man movies, basically telling the Sinister Six to back down or he will kill them, because he knows the threat that Spider-Man is. Anyway, we go on to Infinity War, where mostly all of that plays out the exact same way, except this time Spider-Man already has the iron suit. But then we get to the snap. And even though Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, I just go with the name, he survives the snap. And he still ends up staying with Iron Man, Tony Stark, and Nebula, and everyone, but everyone else gets erased like the same. Tobey Maguire survived too, but I feel like this would happen. Just go with it. I'm going to stop saying that. Anyway, Captain Marvel eventually ends up saving all three of them, but just because Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker survived doesn't mean the people he knew did. He finds out that Betty, who he started to get a small relationship to, and even try to marry her, and Aunt May have both been dusted. Now, Endgame starts with Tony Stark refusing the time heist, even after 5 years. But this won't change anything for the bad, because something does change his mind. After seeing Peter basically seclude himself in depression because he lost everything, Gwen, just everyone he lost, and even giving up Spider-Man, this would sway Tony and ultimately console Peter back into the mix, and they would go and do the time heist with everybody else. But this time, Peter would go with Thor to get the Soul Stone, or the, I'm pretty sure, I don't think it was the Soul Stone. I'm pretty sure it was the Space Stone. Either or, Endgame goes pretty much the same, with the fight going on as normal, and Iron Man doing the snap at the end. But I ultimately think that he would live long enough to thank Peter for all he's done, and Peter returned the favor. Now, this is where we would possibly get The Amazing Spider-Man 4 at this point in time. And I'm sorry if I paused for a second. I was just trying to think what stone that they got. The Soul Stone was on Vormir, so it's just another stone. Just bear with me on that. I'm sorry for that. Anyway, The Amazing Spider-Man 4 would be happening. Like I said, speculation. Unfortunately, Peter would get the news that his Aunt May has died in a crash, a car accident. And this would be much later for Aunt May's death, almost pretty much like Tom Holland's Aunt May. So, I mean, it does work in some regards to Spider-Man. He would be with Betty at the funeral, but who would be the villain here? But there's a few people that we are missing. A few people from comics, like I said. One of them being Dimitri, Chameleon. If you don't know who he is, like I said, read the comics, do all that. I do my research also. Anyway, he would disguise himself as Spider-Man to try and rob a bank. And how does Chameleon come into the mix here? Well, he would escape from prison along with his men, because I guarantee that if they kept making Amazing Spider-Man movies, or if he was in them in general, he would be arrested. But we also get another enemy here. A symbiote falls onto Earth and latches onto Peter, making him a brute, a monster, and just completely unlikable. And what is the symbiote, you might ask? Well, right into the last Spider-Man movie as of now, my speculation, this is where we would see Venom in the Amazing Spider-Man movies for the first time. Now, I just go off pictures for most of these because it's just speculation, and you guys can leave your opinions down in the comments, whatever. This is just visualize what the guys would look like in those movies. Anyway, like I said, he would just start being a jerk out of nowhere to Betty, who wouldn't understand what the crap's going on. And this is where we would see James Johnson, or however you say his name, to fire Eddie Brock. And this is what, like I said, he would... I'm just going off of what he might look like. But that's obviously Tobey Maguire's James Johnson or whatever. And as for Eddie Brock, sorry if I'm a bit lag behind, we have pictures of him from the original MCU and the Venom here from Tobey Maguire's films, but just visualize what he'd look like in the Amazing Spider-Man films, okay? Anyway, ultimately, the symbiote, he would immediately, like, with his rage and everything, he would find out about Chameleon disguising himself as him, and they would get into a fight. But unfortunately for Peter, he would be mistaken for the fake one because, you know, black suit. That's never a good sign for the real Spider-Man. And he would get chased by the police. But Spider-Man would ultimately get away because, you know, he's way faster than cops. Web swingers. But he's ambushed by Kraven the Hunter and tranquilized, ultimately falling to the ground. And like I said, I'm going to say stop going with it because you guys should know what I'm talking about by now. Even with Miles Morales with the Tobey Maguire. Anyway, the symbiote would fall off and ultimately cause Kraven the Hunter to bond with it, creating an unstoppable force of nature, even more so than possibly the original Venom and Spider-Man's Venom. Kraven the Hunter's first instinct? Go after Chameleon, Dimitri, whatever you want to call him, and attack. Now, he would kill all of his men, but Chameleon would get away, presumably dead. Spider-Man eventually wakes up and swings home as fast as he can to right his wrongs. When he gets there, he apologizes to Betty for, you know, being a jerk, and dons the suit, the high-tech suit that was given to him by Tony before he died. He goes to confront Kraven the Hunter. But since Kraven got what he wanted, he became the hero and did everything that he was set out to do. He has nothing to strive for anymore, so he commits suicide by blowing himself up. And everything seems to be over, but not so. The symbiote finds its way to Eddie Brock and starts causing havoc as Venom, because remember, he was fired here. And like the Tobey Maguire Venom, or Eddie Brock, or whatever you want to call him, he would go out, want revenge, pretty much rinse and repeat. Now, Spider-Man would go ahead and find him. The fight would commence for a little bit, but Spider-Man would take off his mask and basically show himself to Eddie, hoping that this will sway him out of it and that he's sorry. But this isn't Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock is not in control of the symbiote. Turns out, Dimitri, Chameleon, is actually the one in control. You see, he found Eddie Brock near the symbiote at the church and killed him for it. So, all this time, it has been Chameleon who survived and took the symbiote for himself. An epic bloody battle goes on between him and Spider-Man. It is very, very tough at first, but after everything Spider-Man Andrew Garfield has been through, he powers through, ultimately getting rid of the symbiote and Chameleon at the same time. Similar to how Tobey Maguire killed Venom in his story. And he would be once again named the hero, and everything would go the way it did past that point. And that's where we leave things, folks. Now, I know. I kept saying over and over again, speculation, and most of these characters probably would never appear. But hey, we don't know that. New Spider-Man films are confirmed in the future. And we don't truly know that what I said couldn't be true or couldn't happen. Same with the Tobey Maguires. It's just a what if for fun. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And this was definitely longer than the Tobey Maguire one, because that was more to input more on Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man character. There was way much more to do with him. But anyways, that's where we leave things. So what do you guys think? Do you think events could have gone down this way? What do you think could have happened had Andrew Garfield been the Spider-Man instead? Leave a comment down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed and want to see more on the channel. And I will see you guys next time.